I am Wendy Ward, and I'm an executive resilience and leadership coach. I've read law and then chose not to follow that path. My path took me elsewhere. And it fascinates me that although I flirted with the law for many years, I am now increasingly surrounded by lawyers. So this particular subject that we're going to be looking at today, I was alerted to it a number of years ago when I started working with lawyers as clients in my coaching practice and came across a DVD that is produced by the Australian Law Society called Resilience at Law. And we've actually shown it at some of our Walela sessions. And in this DVD, we follow 4 individuals who are extremely articulate and intelligent and talk about their experiences of clinical depression. This DVD was produced as a result of the suicide of a young candidate attorney called Tristan Jepson in 2004. And as far as I'm concerned, even one suicide is enough to alert people to this conversation. It's not an easy conversation. I encourage you to look for this, find it, and really take it back to your practices and share it with others. It's a very illuminating DVD. So the tagline for this panel discussion is From Surviving to Thriving. And although we uphold fully the possibility of thriving, and I think that we're going to meet 4 women who really are on that path of thrivability, in other words, at the top of their game, conscious, owning their own leadership, embracing change as opposed to resisting change, in allowing for mistakes as opposed to being defensive about the mistakes, being true to your own. We've already heard so much about authenticity. At the same time, I want us, and it's imperative that we are realistic and that we don't shy away from difficult conversations, and particularly conversations about the collusion that exists in the corridors of many law firms around this particular issue of anxiety, burnout, and depression. So, welcome again. And ladies, I'm going to start by just addressing the audience. And so I'd like to start the discussion by asking you one question. And the question is, what does the word burnout evoke in you? And I'd like to go around sort of vaguely in this kind of a spiral shape if possible, and just raise your hands. In fact, you don't even need to. Popcorn, 1, 2, or 3 word answers only. So what does the word burnout evoke in you? So some quick 1, 2, 3 word answers. Yes. Anxiety. Exhaustion. What did you say? Nothing more. Inability to connect. The norm. Overwhelm. Empty.
Wow.
Can't think clearly. Did you say guilty? Yes, feelings of guilt. Say that again. Overwhelmed. Panic attacks. Failure.
My current state.
The norm. Yes. Adrenal fatigue. Anybody else popping? Unable. Great. Yes, at the back. Say that again.
Stop.
Stop. No space. Insomnia. Right at the back there. Dead but alive. Alive but dead. Gosh. Oh, yes. Can you say that again? Loss of vitality. Helpless. Absolutely. Stuck. Right at the back. Lonely. Yes, over here. Sad. Yes. Yvonne.
resignation.
There's good things in the silver cloud. Yvonne, we know that you write books about this. Yes. Desperation. Yes. Tammy. Can you say that again? Autopilot. Yes, absolutely. Blinkers on autopilot. Yes.
I was going to say out of brain experience.
Yes, true.
Loss of purpose.
Loss of purpose, absolutely. A lot of the lost words, loss of meaning, loss of direction. Yes, last one. Apathetic, absolutely. So you just used descriptors to describe the word burnout, but actually we could probably agree that similar descriptors would be used if one was suffering from anxiety or depression. And so I think that it's important to distinguish between feeling anxious and anxiety disorders. And I'm going to ask Sasha to speak to this as well, because she brought this up. Feeling exhausted, Sasha, and sort of full-blown out burnout. Feeling depressed and clinical depression. So Sasha told a story of, I'm going to just tell the story briefly of how she first became a lawyer. And it was a wonderful story of how she went to a law practice at a young age when her parents were getting divorced, and saw the carpet, and it was luxurious, and she said, I want to be a lawyer, I want to have a carpet like that. And as a partner at Hogan Lovells, I know that it has not necessarily been an easy ride. So I'd love to know from you, in terms of your journey leaving Cape Town, leaving your support system, and arriving in Joburg in your early years, what were some of the stressors that you faced?
Okay. Actually, when I saw the carpet, I was about 9 years old, and it was at my mom's attorneys with Sonnenberg's at the time. And when I saw the carpet, I said, this is a carpet I want. We don't have carpets like that in our offices, because realistically, that was only in the reception. You never really see the offices where carpets like that just wouldn't exist with all the files. But, so I was born and bred in Cape Town, and still don't know why I'm in Johannesburg, but I took the job here as a candidate attorney, and about 7 years ago, started as a candidate attorney. And I was quite sheltered, so I'd always been in Cape Town, never really been out of Cape Town. So it was the first time I actually came to Johannesburg was for my interview. I actually asked them, we were outledgers at the time, and I said, can we do a telephone interview? They said, no, we really need to, feel your presence and see how you are. So came up for the interview, and I remember I walked from our office to Sandton City, and it was this big, very weird world without a mountain, and I didn't understand anything about it. And and there wasn't, I asked people, where's the beach? No, there's no beach. Okay. So, and then I started, I remember on the 4th of January, and I came up to Johannesburg as a candidate attorney, and I was here for about 3 weeks. So the first week was orientation, and then I started with my current boss in the construction practice, and I was here, so the first week went okay. The second week, I decided, well, maybe I should go driving a little bit about and everything, and it was a Sunday morning. Sorry. Okay, so it was a Sunday morning, and spirituality is very important to me, so I was on my way to the temple, and on my way to the temple on a Sunday morning, I met in a very, very serious accident, which ended up totaling the car. The people I was in the driver's seat, and the people who saw what happened said it literally looked like someone lifted me out of the driver's seat, and I woke up in the passenger seat with no recollection, and I'd obviously passed out. So when I passed out, my foot hit the accelerator and I crashed into a wall, which then crashed on top of the car. So I should have been dead, but I wasn't. And I didn't have, so coming to Johannesburg, I didn't have family here. Yes, I had friends, and my firm at that stage, they were, still are very, very supportive. So I just remember I'd woken up in the car and there were all these people around me from the temple, and I just remember saying, you need to phone my boss because I can't go to work tomorrow. You know, 'cause, I mean, you're a candidate attorney, and besides just wanting to, I think it's survive, but also you want to thrive, you want to do well. And I just remember, and I think they managed to phone my mom, and I said, Mom, this isn't my fault, please don't shout at me, and you need to phone my boss because I'm not coming to work tomorrow. And you know, that's the only thing that was running through my head at the time. Eventually I went to hospital and went home for a bit, just to recover and everything. And then, so this was my 3rd week, so in the 3rd week of January. Went home for about a week, came back, carried on working. 2 weeks later, the place where I was staying at got broken into, so all my possessions are gone. So now so the first thing is my spirituality is gone from the point of view it took me 6 months to actually make that drive back to the temple because I was too scared. So 3 weeks later, my house gets broken into. And yes, these are things that happen to everybody. Never ever happened to me, never had an accident, never got stolen from. So I was very sheltered, very, nothing negative ever happened. So we're into February now, everything gets stolen, and I'm completely at a loss now. I am now called the bad luck CA. So after a weekend, this happened on a Friday night. So coming to the Monday. So Sasha, how was your weekend? Yeah. Went back home again and said, Mom, I don't know about this place. It's just not. I don't think it's for me. And I've just got this very bad rep at work. And I don't know people. My boss at this stage is just. He's still my boss. He's a very good man, and he just take your time, do whatever you need to do. Don't worry about anything, and So into February, slowly getting out of my comfort zone, get back into work, try and work and everything, and we get to March. We're now in March. I don't know. This is only my 3rd month in Johannesburg. My 3rd month as a CA. And on a Sunday, my friend and I are driving back home, and we get hijacked. So I'm now sitting on, but all bad things happen in threes, right? So we get hijacked. They take us out of the car, put a gun to my head, beat me up, and while they were beating me up, I don't remember much of it, but I remember going into a fetal position, and I remember them turning me over and saying, okay, you're coming with us. And at that moment, I just thought to myself, if I go with you, and obviously it happened very quickly, I'm saying it slowly, but in that moment, I thought to myself, if I come with you, I'll never come back again, I'll never see my family, and I don't know where it came from, I don't know, I was half beaten, and I just said to him, no. And I think he was a bit confused that I'd said no, because as was I. So he just beat me a little bit more, and then drove away with my friend's car. And for about a year after that, this happened at about 6 o'clock in the evening, and about a year after that, I couldn't drive ever at night. And you must remember, it's law school, and you're going to work at about 7, getting home at about 9, 10. But I wish we had Uber back then. There was no Uber, so I had to rely on a lot of people and to actually just cart me around from simple physical things. But I remember this was a Sunday. I went back to work on the Monday, and it was, how was your weekend? And it was, I remember that same Monday morning. My boss he took my hand. And he's not a very sort of emotional or a touchy person, but he just took my hand, and he didn't say anything to me. I didn't say anything. Actually, I just came to work, and I sat at my desk, and I was, everything you had said, overwhelmed, autopilot. I think it was just my 3rd month, and I was just finished. I was 22 years old, and I didn't know what I was doing and where I was going, and I just wanted to go back home. So, and he took my hand, and he took me to our CEO, and he just said she needs counseling. He just sort her out, she's a good person, and you can't let this, and he just kept saying you can't let this affect you. And I don't remember much of it, but I just remember the counselor sitting with me and saying, what do you want more than anything else? And I said, I don't want to be here, and I don't want this. I want comfort, and I just want to go home. And she said to me, well, phone your mother. And I phoned my mother, and as soon as I heard her voice, I just cried for hours. And I said, I don't want to be here. This is it's a horrible place, and what is this? And I have to be at work, and I just, and it was I think it was the hardest place I've ever been. Besides, yes, I'd worked before in the sense that worked at university, but this was my first ever job, and you dealing with all different kinds of personalities. You trying to be a candidate attorney, and it's a very, you want to do well, you want to thrive, you want to survive, you want to impress, so there's all these things, there's all this pressure, not only from outside, but also an internal pressure, because we were talking about ambition earlier, and there is that ambitious streak inside, I think, every one of us, whatever that may mean to you. And there's all of that, plus you're sitting there and you're just feeling like a complete failure, you've lost your sense of self and security. So lost the spirituality, lost the material possessions, and the third thing was I lost my security. I lost my sense of self at that stage. There were three things, and it was and if you want to call it burnout, then yes, at that point in my life, I was burnt out. I was done, and I think what was very important to me is that I had champions at work. When I had my accident, I had to get my part of my head shaved because I had quite a bad head wound, and you couldn't get the stitches wet. So I had blood in my head that was crusty and dried for about a week. And there was a partner at work who said, Sasha, I'm coming to see you. And she came to see me, and I said, I can't wash my hair. And she put me in a bath and she washed my hair for me. And those are, that was a woman who didn't know me from a bar of soap, and she just said, I'm coming to wash the dried blood out of your hair because I couldn't do it myself. And it's those kind of people that I want to be, and that have affected me, about being the champions in other people's lives. Whether it's about empowering other people, and by empowering other people, you're going to, I just feel like you'll be a warrior and you'll rise to the greatness within. It's about when I called my mother on that Monday, and she said, that's fine, you can come home, but you're going back. I said, no, I'm not. And she said, yes, you are. You're not coming back home here. This is what you wanted. And I'm going to help you fulfill your dream. And, oh, sorry. So, that's what she said to me. She said, all I want to do for you is help you fulfill your dream, and I will not accept you being back here. So it's about having those kind of, I think, champions in your life, and because ultimately, I think more than anything, I felt the fear, and it was the fear of failure. I was failing. I just started and I was failing, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I think the support system, from definitely a firm point of view, plus a personal point of view, and just people, just random strangers coming to visit you and say, I don't know you, but here's a teddy bear because you look bad. So that just it makes a big difference. It made a big difference in my life, and I think that was probably the worst time in my life. And because a week later I came back to work and I just carried on, because that's what you do. You focus until you're completely crazy, and then you wake up one day and you realize, okay, I'm actually surviving, I'm doing okay. So it didn't matter if I only went to the temple 6 months later, or that I couldn't drive for a complete year, or that I relied on hundreds of people, or that I didn't have a life for maybe 2 years. It didn't actually matter, because I can look at it and really just feel that there's a strength inside of me, and I think in every one of you, that you don't realize exists until you put into such a corner that you just fight and claw your way out. So yeah.
Sasha, thank you. When we talked beforehand, you talked about wanting to impress people and the fear of making mistakes, and a lot about those early days in work. But I really thank you for sharing your story. Moleboche, for you, can you share some of your experiences about the pressures that you faced contending in a multinational environment for up to sort of 5 to 6 years, when you said you were doing time as a black female? What were some of the pressures that you faced in that time?
Phew. Oh, okay. So, I was in a, I worked for a multinational for 2 years. That was a pharmaceutical company. Obviously, that was sort of my first work experience, right? That was a breeze. And then I did a stint at Bowman Gilfillan. I did my articles there. And then went back to my old employer. 2007, I joined a small firm, well, a medium firm in sort of black law firm terms. And that's where I did time. I say I did time because for as long as I can remember, during the 6.5 years that I had been there, and of course it's things that you suppose are inherent in certain jobs. I think attorneys in private practice sort of know. I mean, I'm so glad Iona is here. Iona, you must stand up for everybody to see you. She used to work, I think she used to be at the office like 6:30 in the morning and probably leave like, so that's sort of where your, in inverted commas, because it may not be what it is, we do things differently for different reasons, but that's where sort of your training comes from, right? And so you get into this place and their expectation is that you're going to bill and bill and bill some more, and at whatever cost. So you do it because there are certain things that you know you want to achieve. Amongst other things, you contending a very male-dominated industry. You contending as a black female. You contending as a young person. So you've got to show up. That's like the new term I've learned this morning. It's showing up, right? So I was showing up in my own way. So you sort of have, on average, a 12-hour day without fail. I suppose sometimes it's about bums on seats, because I don't think anybody can work for 12 hours necessarily and claim to be productive and or put a 12-hour value as such. And that is sort of your life. So the routine we sort of had was that at 5, when the support staff goes home, we go out and we get food, right, to keep us sort of fresh until about 10 p.m., which is when we sort of all said, okay, it's okay to go home, Your boss is also here and he's sort of looking at you, and you've got to deliver. So at a point, and I think 5 years in, you've sort of not lost in a sense, because you can't lose them, they're your family, but you sort of lost them. You've sort of lost some of your friends. If you've got a sort of personal relationship, it's somewhere in between, You don't know whether it's working or it's not. And you sort of are fortunate if you've got somebody in a similar profession who sort of almost understands, and you're sort of doing time together. So at 10 p.m. you sort of say, okay, we'll meet on Western, Greyston, sort of follow each other somewhere, hug and kiss, go home, sleep, wake up for the next day. It's funny now, but it was like that little trying to live for a minute there. So and I think in all of that, being in a law firm which is not particularly big, you're doing professional work, and you're also, on the one hand, trying to get work on your own so that you can at least have a certain level of autonomy, right? And on the one hand, you completing tenders, and obviously you don't do that necessarily during your normal hours of work, so you sort of do it from about 8 until 4, because you also leave it for the last minute, Sometimes you sort of get onto the couch, you actually take a gown, and then when Brai comes in the morning at 6, you get up and go home, freshen up, come back at 10. It might sound like an over-exaggeration, but that is some of the realities of many of you in the room. And that was sort of it for me, right? So at a point I knew that something had to give, because you sort of lose yourself in all of that. And I think compounded with the fact that sometimes there is little or no appreciation. It's almost as if, well, you are here to deliver on this, but whether you're necessarily part of it for the long haul, you don't necessarily know. So when those types of thoughts sort of get into your head, you then come to a certain realization, and depending on who you are. So at a certain age, I sort of decided that, look, I really had to put number one first, and number one was me, because nobody, I suppose, to a certain extent, you don't necessarily have the courage to have a certain conversation, you know, to sort of put your terms on the table, to say, look, this is how far I think I can go now. You take me as I am, or you find somebody else. You're also not brave enough because you've got a bond, you've got a car, you've got other extended responsibilities. So it's not necessarily as easy as Babatu would make it seem, saying, making a choice and either, you know, finding somebody else. So you stick it out, but then there was a time when I couldn't do it anymore. I'd walk into the office, so, you know, I suppose I could have taken to drinking, but I don't do quite well with alcohol. It just makes me fall asleep, and then sort of one glass is enough, you know. So I'm not too sure about other sort of things to try and venture into. So I took to online shopping. So I'd go in the morning. So I knew all the sites, right? At the time, I think it was South 86, now changed to Spree, it was Zendo, it was Amazon. You name it, I was on it. Runway sale kicks in at 8. At 8, I'm like, runway, you know? So I'd walk in zombified, but the only sort of thing that kept me sane a bit was the fact that I could shop and buy nice things, wait for them to come. And I would do it until I got a certain level of pressure to deliver on something. And for most of you, if you're in litigation practices, you sort of know that there are times when you'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking the court file might not be paginated, although you know it's done. So, you know, wake up in a cold sweat. Yeah, so, I mean, when that sort of moment where I was so extremely zombified kind of came, I knew I had to have an exit plan. And probably one of two things. I think at the time I sort of maybe made a decision that, look, I could probably go back to a big firm where at least there the succession plan is sort of in black and white, etc. You know, at least I know that I'll be doing time, but I would probably be doing time as a partner, and the benefits are at least more appealing. Or I could probably go back in-house. I've been there, I know the ropes, etc. And one of the clients, okay, which is where I am now, needed somebody on secondment, and this is sort of how I exited. And thank God I did, or rather that the time came when it did. Because while you sort of want to shy away from the fact that you are progressively going into a depression, I probably was going into a depression. You know, you just become suddenly resentful. You don't even, I mean, because it's also not your firm, you sort of don't care anymore, right? So you don't really have much to lose. And that's sort of where I sort of was at a point in time. Scary, but yeah.
Thank you for sharing your vulnerability so honestly. And I mean, what stuck up for me was the word that you used around the profession being an unforgiving profession.
Oh, yes.
And at one point you said, you know, you forgot yourself as opposed to lost yourself. And I thought, well, that there can't be much worse than a place like that where you actually forget yourself. So thank you. Michelle, what I love about your story is that throughout you loved your profession. You got on well with your colleagues, you had good relationships, you mostly liked your clients. And despite that, you also went into a cycle of burnout, and with the birth of your third child, you were diagnosed with severe postnatal depression. So for you, Michelle, what is I'm curious to know from your experience, what is the difference between anxiety, burnout, and depression? And is there a progression from one to the other?
I think there's definitely a progression. I mean, I always, we as lawyers, we always see things in black and white. That's what I said to you. And I always sort of held the view that either you can make it or you don't make it. And people who don't make it fall away early on, and those that do make it will make good lawyers and should be where they are. But it's definitely a progression, and I think that's why some people sort of find it hard to distinguish. And some people say, well, I'm exhausted and I'm overwhelmed and I'm struggling, and I just need a rest, or I need a holiday, or being burnt out, like Mola Wilke described. It's a gradual thing. It doesn't just sort of happen suddenly. I think what Sasha had were a series of traumatic experiences that really, I don't know how you survived them, but burnout is a gradual thing of continuous high stress, and it is the environment that we're in. Whether you're in a small firm or a medium firm or a large firm, the depression, you also hear people saying, well, I'm feeling low, and I've got no energy, and I've lost my joie de vivre, or whatever you want to call it. But there's a difference between that and totally withdrawing from your colleagues within the firm and from your family, isolating yourself, and just pushing things away and not wanting to engage, and just you become, like the words I've heard, is a robot. You just show up for work, you do the work, and then you go home and you're a robot again. And I described to you the sandwich between working those long hours and being a good mother. Going home for those 2 hours that you get, or whatever it is, and actually giving yourself completely to the kids. And then anxiety. I mean, I've never experienced anxiety in my life before. Really, I mean, I didn't have too much fear of standing up in court. I didn't have too much fear when we went into a big arbitration, because it was preparation. So there was that good stress, the nerves and the excitement and the enjoyment of working at that level and enjoying the job. And then there's panic attacks, which started happening to me when I had that postnatal depression. And of being, the first time I ever experienced it was exactly a week after Caroline was born. And I remember my husband was away, as he often is, and sitting there one evening with this six-day-old baby and an 18-month-old child and a 4-year-old. And sort of I just went into a panic. All I could see was bottles, bottles and dummies and formula and whatnot. And I just sat there thinking, what the hell am I doing here? And bearing in mind, the anxiety came from, I went to see my doula just before I had the baby. I worked literally up until week 40, and I worked the weekends, and I was there, and I was wrapping up, and I made sure my practice was in good hands when I left it. I knew where it was, I knew where to come back to. But the doula said to me, she said, do you realize you're pregnant? You're huge. Like, you're going to deliver in 2 weeks. Do you actually compute that you're pregnant? Are you here at all? Do you know what's going on? Have you prepared at all for this child? And that was my sort of moment where I said, I'm not here. Of course I'm not having a baby. Of course not. I'm working, and that's where I am. And I don't care. I will get it done, and that's how I've always been. And it hit me like a ton of bricks about 2 weeks after I had the third child. I think that it was a gradual thing. It was a gradual thing, you know. It happened over a period of about 5 years. And I think the difference with me is it was familial, so we had a tendency to it. So, you know, depression is in our family, but I just never recognized it. And that moment of panicking, and I had to go outside in the middle of the night, and both children started crying, knock on my domestic's door and say to her, please help me. It was just, you know, the worst feeling. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
And I came back, you know, but I had to make the decision at some point to say, I don't think you can have both. And that realization struck me. You can't have both. So to the fullest. There must be some compromise and some negotiation, you know, on both sides.
Thank you. I mean, Gail, you speak a lot to that. And Gail, your understanding of the importance of self-awareness is for you has been significant. When to move on, when you're in the wrong situation, when you need to relook at things, and that critical thing of we've got to make a choice at some stage. So I'd love to ask you what your advice is for other people who may be unhappy in their workspace and or are at the risk of burnout and depression, relating that back to this kind of concept of choice that you have.
Okay, I'm going to start by taking a step back to just explain. I have not experienced burnout or depression or anxiety. I've been anxious, I've been depressed, I've been tired, I've been very, very, very tired. I have 2 children. But I haven't experienced a clinical experience of that, and I believe it is because of an ability. I've just been lucky enough to recognize when it's starting and to make the right choice. And I think very early on, before I had my first child, to realize that you have to make that choice. Exactly what Michelle just said, that you cannot have it all. And that if you try and have it all, you are going to kill yourself. You cannot be a full-time mother and a full-time career woman. You need to choose which one. You can do both, but you cannot do both fully, and you've got to choose which one, and both decisions are valid decisions, and I feel very strongly about that. If you choose that you're going to be a full-time career woman who still works until 8 o'clock at night, that is a valid decision. And if you choose that you're going to be a stay-at-home mom, that is a valid decision, but you need to make that choice. You need to, or make a compromise, as I have in my situation now, is that I work as a consultant. I don't earn the money that I used to earn. I don't have the job satisfaction that I used to earn. I have a lot of job satisfaction. I do love my work, but I don't have that feeling of being, I'm a killer career woman who can take over the world with my fabulous legal mind. I don't get that feeling. So I've made compromises, and I've made the compromises I have because for me, being a hands-on mom is a very important part of what I want to do with my life. But to take it back, I've probably been in every work situation. I've been in a tiny little firm I started out in. I've worked as a lecturer. I've worked as an in-house lawyer. I've worked briefly in a big firm, and there, in the big firm situation, very quickly realized how unhappy I was, that I felt completely drained. I felt I was convinced there was a machine in the building taking my creativity out of me, and recognized those things soon enough to leave. I was helped along by the fact that I was pregnant with a baby I had struggled to conceive. So it put things in stark relief for me. Are you going to be a mom, or are you going to go back to work to this job that you hate and not be with your baby? So I made the decisions in time, and I spoke when Wendy and I were speaking on the phone about one of my jobs where I drive to work along the highway. And at a certain point on the highway, my body realized I was going to work. My mind knew where I was going, but my body realized where I was going, and I'd get a stomachache. And I realized when that happened, that's not okay. You can't get a stomachache because your body realizes you're going to work. When that's happening, you've got to make a change. And I think it's by picking up those signs in yourself that you think there's a machine in the building sucking the creativity out of you. That's a good sign things are wrong. That you're getting a stomachache on the way to work. To learn to say, okay, there's something wrong, I've got to change the situation. And to learn to say, I'm not a failure because I'm changing the situation. That's a hard thing for us as women. I think that especially leaving, when I was pregnant and I left the big firm situation, a director of a big firm, what you are supposed to have wanted to achieve in a legal career. You know, I've done what you're supposed to have wanted to do. I've got there through a very difficult roundabout route, and I failed at it. I did fail at it, and that's okay. Being able to say, well, that's okay. I'm not a big firm person. It's okay that I failed at it. It doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It just means I failed at that particular route of being a lawyer, and accepting that. Did I answer the question?
So there's an interplay of the environment, the personality types, the work itself, and to move from the personal to more of the systemic. The stats and the research, and I'm not going to necessarily quote you on that. It's available, and you know, feel free to come to me if you are looking for that, but show that anxiety and depression and burnout are disproportionately high among particularly full-time lawyers, and that there is an alarming level of psychological distress in the law profession. So I'm curious to know, what are the reasons for this prevalence of the conditions? What is it about the legal environment? What is it about the nature of the legal environment, the nature of the job itself, the nature of the personality types that are attracted to this profession?
I've always held a very firm view that, unlike many professions, law is not difficult to get into. It's a breeze. I mean, all you have to do is to read and apply and deliver, right? But yet the pressure and or this level of gravitas and or weight that is attached to being a lawyer sort of makes it so externally frightening. And when you are in it, even worse, right? It's like this deep hole. I mean, strictly speaking, you draft opinions, you draft pleadings, you give clients counsel on certain, based on what you've read, you know. But I guess because you've got to do it for so long, such extended hours, and particularly more because there's so much value attached to each minute that you spend on trying to just deliver on this thing, adds more weight to it. So the pressure about fees, guys, like if nobody had to write a fee, we'd all be happy lawyers, trust me, you know. But you've got overheads, you've got, I suppose, competition issues as well, because it's about where you are, you know. And I think that's why most of us sort of get stuck in it, because the perception and or it's more attractive when you're an attorney and you're in practice rather than when you're in-house, right? Because then you've got it's a status issue, believe it or not. So when you're sort of stuck in it, and I mean, she says, her mom said, look, it's about your dream, you have to go back. And yet she didn't want to go back, in spite of the fact that it may have been her dream at the time. But so far, what she had experienced, whether in or out, was just so unappealing for her anymore. She should have at least been allowed to then, or rather be in a position to say, you know what, I'm walking away and it's okay, right? But I think there's also that external pressure. And when there's all of these things compounded and just weighing you down, you can't even express yourself, you know. And you get stuck in it, and it becomes a vicious cycle. we're making money, and so this has to, you're like a hamster on a.
I think the issue of the billable hour is going to be up for conversation constantly, and it's not going to go away immediately because it's a systemic issue. But what are the negative effects of the billable hour, and more particularly, what does this practice discourage?
I've just been, as I was listening to this conversation, I was just thinking, the really peculiar thing about law is it's probably when you're in the law firm environment, it's probably one of the only jobs where you're not judged on the quality of your work. You're judged on how much money you're making for the firm. No one's going, oh my goodness, you did a beautiful piece of work there, what a great contract, what a great litigation. It might, if you've got a really good boss, that might happen a little bit. But you're going to get promoted on how many hours you build, how many clients you build in, that type of thing. And it's, when you think about it objectively, if you take a step back, that's really weird. That you aren't judged on the quality of your work. That's strange. There's something wrong with that.
And what else does that discuss? Sorry.
No, I was going to say the only people judging you on the quality of the work are your clients, because at the end of the day, they're coming to you because you're a specialist. You can't be a jack of all trades anymore. You have to be a specialist. To be a specialist, you've got to put out the quality work. So you've got, I think, like you're saying, on the one hand, you've got, yes, we sell time for a living. You can't not put in the hours if you're selling time for a living. It's as simple as that. It's just 1 and 1 equals 2. So if you're selling time for a living, you've got to put in those hours and, yes, make the fees and the billables, etc. And on the other hand, it's, yes, if you've got good champions, then they're telling you you're doing good work. But it's the clients, that at the end of the day that are saying, yeah, we want that good quality work. It's just the answer. They come to you and they expect an answer, and they expect an answer yesterday. So, I mean, those are the stresses and strains of it. It doesn't sort of, I think it discourages maybe what you knew. It discourages your version of what you knew or what you picture as a life. There are compromises that have to be made, and there are decisions that I think personally you have to prioritize. You have to decide what those priorities are.
If I can just jump in, I mean, I know it obviously differs from firm to firm and depending on the size, but there has been a small change, in the approach, in the sense that more and more firms have got their pro bono departments up and running, and they give value to non-billable work because, we've all got to do the 24 hours and so on, and a lot of people do a lot more than their 24 hours, and that way get involved in some fantastic initiatives. So that's changing, and it was mentioned earlier, other roles, like whatever it is, knowledge manager, business development manager, but it hasn't changed so much. And the issue is when you become a mother, there really is a perception sometimes to start with that you're a second-class fee earner. I call it the second-class fee earner. Before you've even begun, there's this unconscious prejudice, and it doesn't matter how hard you work or how many hours you bill, or how long you're at the office. You can cut your salary, you can cut your targets, you're still not making as much money as the other person is. So it's competing against those unspoken prejudices and biases and so on, and you do have to speak out to change things, and to change things requires a certain level of seniority, and also change from within the firm. People say, how are we going to change it? Well, people bring in consultants, and it's the people that have to change, not the firm. It's the people in the firm that have to change, and the leaders. And they've got to show leadership. And I know a lot is changing in some firms. In others, it's taking a lot longer.
And I suppose, again, linking into the first panel discussion, change requires innovative thinking, but when you're charging against a billable hour, you're not going to wanting to collaborate because you're wanting to keep the work. You tell a story about how, or was it Gail? How amazed you were that work wasn't referred to you.
That was
yes.
really
And so all of those preconditions. Why do you think that so many lawyers and I want to ask you this question, stay for the long haul, despite this pressure, despite what we've been discussing just now?
It's the desire not to be seen to have failed at sort of what you started, and generally what the world